Hello, everyone. This is Lauren Chumbley, the current president of the International Live Events Association. I'm here with Sara Henry with the City of Austin. She is a public information officer with the Austin Center for Events. We are chatting on behalf of ILEA, which is comprised of live event professionals, small business owners, and people whose well-being is dependent on meeting in person. So during times of COVID, Sara is here for us to help guide us through, the foreseeable future until we can be normal again. Sara, can you clarify your role a little bit further on what your job is right now for us?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Sure. So in normal times, the Austin Center for Events is a group of City of Austin agencies, including police, fire, economic development, EMS, et cetera. And we oversee permitting for outdoor events within the city limits. In times of COVID, I'm focused on economic recovery efforts and communicating those efforts within the special event industry.
Okay, perfect. So you are here to help us. I wanted to start a lot of what we're seeing, people talk about is the concern for another lockdown. And can you talk us through what factors have to happen or what we need to look for on our own to be concerned about not having weddings anymore or live events?
Right. It's a very challenging time right now to be able to understand what's coming next and plan for the future. I would say that's probably the hardest thing about where we all are with COVID-19, especially the special event industry. It's an industry of people whose job is to plan, and it's especially difficult when you can't do that. So I certainly understand that question. Right now, we are in stage 4 of the risk-based guidelines. And the question that's come up is what would it take for us to move to stage 5? And that, as Austin Public Health has shared, is a complicated formula with many factors, including things like they're looking at the capacity of healthcare workers to provide care within the city. They're looking at the 7-day rolling average of hospitalizations. They're looking at the case doubling formula and several other factors. So it's definitely not an easy if this happens, then this will automatically happen. So that's, again, what kind of makes this process so difficult. But the best way for folks to stay on top of what's happening and know the latest information is austintexas.gov/COVID-19. There are a couple of different dashboards on that website, and that risk-based guidelines is updated regularly. So you can see what the host hospitalizations look like and what those other data points look like to be able to track.
What do we say then to vendors who are asking, am I able to have a wedding this weekend? We just say, as of today.
Right. I mean, within the last week, the orders have changed 3 times. So it's very difficult to be able to plan, and I'm very sympathetic to that. But as of right now, there are new guidelines that were released this morning. So before the 4th of July holiday, we had guidelines for wedding venues specifically that the indoor capacity was 50%. Sorry, indoor capacity was 50%, and there were no more than 10 people allowed for outdoor services. That has now changed as of this morning. So now we're in a position where businesses can do 50% of indoor capacity, and there's no outdoor limit for capacity. So that's a huge change, and I think that will help people be able to continue to operate.
Perfect. So people can have events outside with more than 10 people with a wedding or a live event, a professional live event. Because I do want to talk about that. Can you talk us through the difference between a social gathering, which is not permitted, and then a social event or a wedding?
Sure. And this is where the guidelines from the state are very specific. So a social gathering would be like a party in your backyard, or Easter picnic, something like picnic, something like that. And so those events are not allowed over 10 people. So that's the difference there. If you are a business and you are specifically for weddings, if your wedding is in a church or congregation or religious facility, a place of worship, the rules are different there. There were actually no occupancy limits for events or for religious services. If you were a wedding venue, you're a business, so you fall into the business category, and that's where you have the 50% designation for indoor occupancy. And then what's also very specific and unique to weddings is you have no outdoor occupancy, similar to a restaurant. Right now, you're able to have outdoor spaces in a restaurant. So, the difference there is that if you're a bar, obviously they have different rules of what they're allowed to do. So it gets very, very specific based on what you're doing, and that only adds to the complication of trying to keep up with what's happening. Again, the resources are there. The state of Texas has very specific guidelines, which are pretty comprehensive and relatively easy to follow. And that's all on the Open Texas website for the state. And so that would be the best place to go to stay up to date with what's happening.
Right. And even we can have these social events as opposed to a social gathering, even if they are at 50% capacity inside or unlimited outside, they still need to be, the tables with being 6 feet apart. Everyone still needs to have a face covering, even if they're outside, except while eating.
Absolutely. There are new health and safety protocols for every sort of business during COVID-19. And so again, each industry has different things that they're required to do. But in Austin Travis County, face coverings are now required for everyone if you were in public or if you were inside a business for sure. And there are now enforcement components with that as well. There's a $250 fine. So we just want to make sure everyone knows that that's the rule and that people are being as safe as possible.
Sure. So what we were talking about earlier with the shutdown, should it happen, obviously that would be pretty devastating to a lot of the vendors who have weddings coming up, a lot of them rescheduled ones from the spring in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So with that being said, though, you had mentioned, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about some economic recovery opportunity that City of Austin is offering now.
Right. So City Council has approved millions of dollars in funding to help with economic recovery efforts during COVID-19. And as they've approved the funding for various programs, it takes staff a little bit of time to stand that up administratively. So what was announced this morning is small business grants that are available to businesses within the city limits. And all of the specific requirements for how to apply are on atxrecovers.com. But essentially, the funding is $16 million in total and up to $40,000 grants for businesses. And so this is a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big opportunity for people to kind of get their application in and be able to, to be able to tread water for a little bit longer. So we definitely want to make sure that and these are grant funding. This is not a loan. This is grant funding. And there's a bucket for for-profit businesses and for nonprofit businesses, depending on where you fall in the category. But again, the application period is open starting today and for 3 weeks. And then the cap on that grant would be 40 grand. So it's a nice opportunity for people to again, be able to keep their doors open.
And I think you kind of touched on this in our the reopening guide panel, but you were saying the need is greater than what?
Right. And so, the reason why we wanted to talk with you today is because this is coming online and, $16.5 million seems like a lot of money, but the need is definitely greater than the available funding. So get your application in early. There are people to help support you through the application process if you have questions about the forms. We want to make sure that people have access to this funding and are able to apply.
Okay, perfect. So we did talk about that. So one of the other big questions that comes up frequently are city orders versus state orders. So would you be able to kind of talk through our interpretation of that?
Sure. So for a state order, obviously local government is bigger or smaller than state government. And so whenever the state issues an order, the local municipality is required to follow it. And so often what you'll see is when something comes from the governor's office, you'll see the local orders updated to match it so that we are in compliance with what the state is requiring.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure I got all of our questions. Sorry, I only wrote so fast. So we touched on that. And I mean, we touched on if a wedding is a, a social event, but it's for profit. And then I I can run with this question. I know that you're a government employee, but um, do you have any recommendations for us at this time as of July 7th?
Yeah, we are unfortunately not through this time. It has been, since March in Austin, it's been very difficult to know what to plan for next, and to sort of tread water. I certainly understand that everyone is fatigued with staying home. Everyone is fatigued with the very real impacts to their business, their livelihoods, their mental state. I think the most important thing right now is to know that if we can stay home and stay safe, we can get through this together. And it's very important that we are just remaining diligent in our efforts to be safe and to follow these health protocols so that we can get out of this as quickly as possible.
Okay, perfect. Well, I will post this video and I'll include your email address. Sara is a government employee. She is here to help us. So if there's anything we didn't touch on in this video and you'd like to hear from her, I would say that you're very great with email. I think you're very responsive. So you can definitely reach out to Sara, and we want to make sure we're visiting the austintexas.gov/COVID-19 as a resource, as well as atxrecovers.com. Where can they find the grant application again?
atxrecovers.com website.
Okay. And then where can they sign up for that mailing list? Because I know you're sending out mailers.
Oh, absolutely. So yet another website, austintexas.gov/ACE, ACE. And at the very top, there's an opt-in link to get the email updates that our office sends out.
Okay. Perfect. Well, I really appreciate your time, Sara, and thank you so much. And I'm sure we may just end up doing this again in another couple of weeks.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for your time.